I see my name in shining lights, yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. In business, we talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you'll not want to miss, so let's jump right in. I've been excited for this conversation because I am talking with an author, a sociologist who has been focused on top leadership in shape-shifting organizations. And in fact, he has coined a term, the office verse, and he is the co-author of Office Shock, Creating Better Futures for Working and Living. That's Bob Johansen. Bob, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. I know you have been talking about how the workplace of the future, the office verse, as you describe it, will disrupt many of today's organizational models. So first, I have to understand, Bob, how did you become interested in this topic, and where has your work led in this area?
Sure. So I'm at Institute for the Future in Silicon Valley, and we're the longest running futures think tank in the world now. And we were approached during the COVID crisis by the furniture manufacturer, Office Furniture, USM from Switzerland. And their CEO called me and said, Bob, we would like to begin a new conversation on what's after the COVID crisis, what's new for not only office buildings, but also what we call officing, or the way we work, and ultimately the office verse, that kind of archipelago of possibility that includes buildings, but also includes this crazy, this wonderful mix of new media. So I just got intrigued by this, not only as a threat to how we've done business in the past, but an opportunity to do things we've never done before.
Wild. So let's dive in over here. What is office shock, and why is it important?
So office shock is abrupt, unsettling change in how, where, when, and even why we work. And the title, Office Shock, actually an homage to the futurist Alvin Toffler, who 50 years ago wrote a book called Future Shock. I'm a futurist, so I focus my life 10 years ahead and think future back. And in the book, Office Shock, we go out to that future and say with a great deal of clarity where we're going in terms of the direction of how we work and when and why we work. But we've got a lot of things to do in the present to figure out how we get from where we are now to where we want to be.
So fascinating. Very, very interesting. Again, I'm chatting with the co-author of Office Shock, Creating Better Futures for Working and Living. We've been talking about the future of the office verse. So, Bob, I'd like to ask, what mindset is most important as people think about the future of work?
Yeah, so the mindset, the key to this is to think future back. The now is so noisy, and we're kind of stuck in sort of old-fashioned questions like, when do we go back to the office? The first question we should be asking is, why an office at all? Why an office at all? And there are good answers to that question, but it should be a question asked, not an assumption made. And the reason you do want to meet in person, the reason you do on offices, is for things like orientation, trust building, renewal, culture building, early stage creativity. But in fact, many of today's offices or yesterday's offices, they're not very good at those things. So we need to rethink this kind of how and why and where we work. And we've introduced in the book, Office Shock, 7 spectrums of choice. Beginning with purpose, then asking what are the outcomes you're seeking, in particular, what are the climate impacts you're seeking, then asking how do you create a culture of belonging in this increasingly distributed world, then ask how do you want to be augmented, because over the next decade, we're going to be augmented whether we want to or not, and we've got a great opportunity to ask the question of what do humans do best, what do computers do best. Then you get to the spectrum of where and when do you work, from the office building to the office verse. And finally, the spectrum of agility. How do you hold this all together? How do you be essentially a corporate athlete to thrive in this kind of new multimedia world? So, we're humble futurists. We know where things are going, and we're not telling you what to do. We're just helping you make smart choices.
Interesting. Again, I'm chatting with Bob Johansen, who is a distinguished fellow at the Institute for the Future, and it's not often that we have a futurist on the program. Bob, you've been working at IFTF back beginning in 1973, and you've been a professional futurist for nearly 50 years. You've got, I believe, over 12 books, and I know you've spoken quite frequently. So I'm curious, what does a futurist add to the conversation about the future of offices?
Well, the futurist allows you to restart at a basic level, to get out of the noisy now, to think future back. And it's quite clear, if you think 10 years ahead, it's quite clear that the media we're going to be able to use to work are going to be dramatically better than what we have today. It's quite clear we're going to have sensors everywhere. They're going to be very cheap. Many of them are going to be connected, and some of them will be in our bodies. It's quite clear that we're going to be more diverse in our workforce than we've ever been. And we're going to have to think consciously about how to create a culture of belonging, a culture of inclusion, a culture with increased equity to make things hold together. It's also quite clear that what the Army War College calls the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, it's quite clear that that's going to get worse. It's going to get more VUCA. So the way to win in that kind of world is not to look for certainty, because it's nowhere to be found. The way to win in that world is to be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. So we call it in the book flexive intent. You want to be very clear about direction, very flexible about execution, and futurists help you find that clarity.
Bob, so many of our listeners are entrepreneurs and small business owners, and the time during COVID certainly was a gut punch, and it I think led a lot of folks to rethink how they office, how they work in general. What does it mean to have employees? What kind of businesses do they want to be in, and so on. I'm curious if there's a message here, not just for the big businesses and the large entities with large corporate offices around the country, but also for the small business owners that may have been in a WeWork or an office sharing environment.
Yeah. Shalom, that's such an important question, and it's such an important opportunity. In a real sense, Office Shock makes it possible for a small organization to have a big impact on big businesses without being big. It gives us a chance to leverage size, to scale in ways we've never been able to scale before, to network in ways we've never been able to network before. So to me, this is the great opportunity for small businesses, for small organizations, to be big in terms of impact without being big.
Fascinating. And we're quickly running close to the end of our time together. So I just want to ask one last question. Why is it important to think future back in addition to present forward?
So future back thinking gives you a kind of calm, gives you a kind of clarity, gives you a kind of direction that you can't have unless you think future back. So, we have to immerse ourselves. We have to engage in the now. I'm not saying that, but it's a problem if you get stuck in the now. And what future back allows you to do is think about the future first. And the future, it's easier actually to think about the future back than it is to think about the now, because the now is just so noisy. So what we're suggesting is you think about the future first. And I like the sweet spot of 10 years out. It's far enough to be beyond your normal horizon, but close enough in to be practical. So think about the future first, then the next, and then the now. And you'll have a better perspective. You'll be able to develop your clarity of direction, develop your calm, develop your center, while also staying very flexible about how you get there.
Fantastic. Well, again, I've been chatting with Bob Johansen, the co-author of Office Shock, and Bob is a senior fellow at the Institute for distinguished fellow at the Institute for the Future, a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization in Silicon Valley. You can learn more about their important work on their website at iftf.org, as well as through their website, learn more about Bob, as well as find out about Office Shock. And I know the book, Bob, can be purchased, if I understand correctly, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and frankly, wherever books are sold. Any last comments from you?
Yeah, definitely. The book's out there. It just came out, so the timing's perfect for this conversation. We also just released a new chatbot based on the book. So it's based on GPT-3, and you can actually go, we'll put the link into this. You can actually go and probe the Office Shock book.
How cool.
In much the same way that people are doing now with ChatGPT. So that's
how
kind
cool.
of
Well, we'll share the links through our show notes. Thanks so much for joining us, Bob.
Thank you.